This is an interview on the 17th of April 2006 with William Barker Scott Bellairs, V66632, VX132240, Corporal, 39th Battalion, Headquarter Company, 1 Platoon. Bill, prior to joining the 39th, you're with the 14th Battalion, a Paran battalion. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, they evidently had the idea that if your birthday fell within a certain month, they conscripted you, and they had all of the... My father, who had served in the First World War, was acting as a cook at the 3MD enlistment in Paran, in Commercial Road, Paran. And the next thing I got the notice to say that to report to Paran, 3MD, and be interviewed. So I reported and was told that I was to be in the 14th Battalion, Australian Militia Forces, and be stationed at Balcombe in Melbourne, Victoria. I duly reported, was medically examined again, and went into Balcombe in the 14th Battalion. There, because of the extra 2 shillings a day for specialist pay, I became a signaller. And because I had a loud voice, I was made a corporal in that platoon, the signals platoon. When the after the initial 3 months training, specialists were kept in camp. The others were allowed, rifle companies were allowed to go home. All NCOs and specialists were kept in camp. I ended up with a terrific job as corporal of the sergeant's mess. When the volunteer papers for the 39th Battalion for garrison duty in Port Moresby came around in 41, that'd be about in August I think it would be, of 41. I still wanted to do my best for Australia. My brother was already in the AIF, younger brother in the 2nd 4th Field Regiment, and I thought, well, they won't take me. I tried for the AIF, I tried for the Navy. Navy wouldn't take me on account of the stammer. I never got round to trying for the Air Force. I didn't like the Blue Orchids. I had no love for the Blue Orchids. They slipped it between sheets. Anyway, I ended up volunteering for the 39th Battalion just to do a bit of my job as garrison duty. We sailed, we went to Darley, where we were given rudimentary training consisting of marching, how to present arms, had very little training. Rifle training included firing 2 shots at the rifle range. We were only allowed 2 bullets. And I had my corporal stripes confirmed in Darley under Bert Oliver, the lieutenant in charge of SIGs there. And I was the only NCO of the SIG platoon. We were then taken by train on the 30th of December 1941 and embarked upon the Aquitania in Sydney Harbour. We were given pre-embarkation leave, which was something the 53rd never enjoyed. And we embarked with the 53rd, who was supposed to also garrison duties, I believe that our original purpose was to relieve the 49th Battalion, who had been the garrison battalion in Moresby for quite a long time, some 18 months.
Bill, prior to going up to Sydney to join the Aquitania, in Darley, you were in the 6 section.
Yes.
Who were some of the other... Can you remember some of the other people that were with you then?
Oh, Jackie Sims, Bob Barr, Jack Gould, Tom Keating, Bobby Hughes.
Was Ken Phelan there then?
Ken Phelan, Bobby Hughes, Kevin Sullivan, who later played for Collingwood after the war was over. And Kevin unfortunately departed this life early in the 56 or 58.
So the battalion at Darley was pulled together from a lot of different units. What was the feeling like at Darley? Was a good morale, good feeling at that stage?
Oh, we were all young. I was the eldest one in the platoon, mind you, because I was 23, I think it was. A lot of the others were only 17, 18.
You looked upon as more of a father, not a father figure,
Thanks very much.
No, a big brother figure, maybe.
Big brother, and being the only NCO of the platoon, I thought, and it's got a lot of good memories and a lot of bad ones. But we knit together as a pretty good mob. When we embarked on the Aquitania, we were more or less kept together. I think it was on F deck or E deck, somewhere way down towards the bottom of the hold. Most of us ended up sleeping up on the main deck, on the boat deck.
Where it was a bit cooler.
A bit cooler, that's right.
Can you, again, prior to going on the Aquitania, can you remember, were you involved in the march through Melbourne Street?
Yes, I was. And I was with the platoon. As the NCO of the platoon, I marched behind them, and I heard quite a few voices saying, "Oh, they're only chocos," which, of course, rang off our backs like water because we were too young. And
could they tell by your uniform or by your badges that you were chocos? Well,
we never had the Australian shoulder patches, which the AIF had. They all had the grey background on their colour patch and Australia up on their shoulders.
But you still had the colour patch though?
We had the colour patch, but it had no background.
But that would have made you proud to have the colour patch and all be marching in uniform as a unit.
Well, we were proud to be able to march because it was listed as Australian troops bound for overseas, marching through Melbourne. This was media publicity. I can always recall that loud voice shouting out, "They're only bloody chocos."
So at Darley, there wasn't a lot of training. There wasn't a lot of infantry training that you can remember.
Well, we did take part in the Battle for Camperdown, which was an army exercise with other militia units around.
What was that like?
Oh, it was actually fun. More fun than anything else, I think. I can recall being set upon by some AIF reinforcements in Darley.
Why was that?
Oh, there was a lot of animosity between the AIF. The story was we were better paid than what the AIF were. I don't know whether that was true or otherwise, but the fact that we weren't volunteering to fight for England, but we were volunteering to fight for Australia. And or this is the way I've always viewed it. Although we didn't consider ourselves being sent to Moresby to fight, we were garrison duty, which meant garrisoning Port Moresby. Although, to my knowledge, the Australian government had been advised of a potential Japanese threat in 1935, practically nothing had been done about it. They had one battalion, the 2nd 22nd in Rabaul. They had an independent company in Timor, and this was our screen against invasion. We ended up with quite a few 2nd 22nd, those that managed to evacuate and return to New Papua after the Japanese attacked Rabaul in force, including Colonel Bill Owen, who took command of the 39th for a very short period.
So, on Christmas Day, or on Boxing Day, you left...
Boxing Day we left, yes.
By train to Sydney. That was
Boxing Day we embarked was the 30th. We left I think it was in the morning.
What was the trip like up on the train? Because it would have been fairly hot and congested, but exciting?
It was congested, and we were in our woolen uniforms, as usual, with full kit, rifles, and everything else aboard the train. I'm trying to think, was it there or coming down from Townsville? I slept in the luggage rack. I can't remember. But we got to Pyrmont, we embarked. I think it was Pyrmont, Circular Quay probably. We embarked straight out of the train onto the Aquitania.
And was it an impressive looking ship?
It was a huge ship.
Because I suppose a lot of the chaps had never been interstate or even on a boat in their life.
I think most of us, about 98%, had never been on a boat in their life. Remember, this is 1941, when the Australians weren't travelling like they are these days. When we settled down in where we'd been, it was, I think, 6 or 8 to a cabin. The Aquitania was a troop ship, and it had been used for carting troops out from England to the various battle stations throughout Egypt, through Syria, and things aboard. There was a funny story occurred when they were loading, I believe they were loading liquid refreshments, beer, etc., down, and the captain of the ship made the inquiry, "Who are these for?" And he was told, "These are the officers' mess, sir." Oh, he said, "And where is the soldiers' mess?" "There isn't one, sir." "Oh, well, if there's no soldiers' mess, there's no officers' mess either. Put those ashore." That was the story I was told. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But
there were other units, Bill, that were on board too.
The 53rd was on board, a small detachment of ACAC.
There was an army hospital on board, was there?
I don't remember the army hospital.
There was talk of some of the 53rd Battalion members being basically marched on.
Oh, they
Did
weren't.
you see any of that?
They weren't. Now we were pretty busy establishing ourselves there. The Aquitania's a pretty big. I couldn't exactly swear to it, but I believe there were well over 1,200 aboard a ship designed to carry about 800.
So when it finally left Sydney Harbour and went out by the heads, how did you feel?
We were waving to the people right along North Shore there as they waved to us. We were waving back to them. Of course, no one was supposed to know we were going overseas. No one knew who it was, whether it was AIF or anything else. It was very, very hush-hush, very secretive.
So what was the trip, once you settled in, what was the trip up the coast like?
Well, it was actually great. We enjoyed the sunshine. We did a lot of sunbathing. We had various details. I was put in charge of the spud peeling at one stage, which was done in a huge big bowl of about 30 feet across, and just bag after bag of potatoes was poured in there. You added water and the power was switched onto it, and this great thing went around, supposed to be removing the peel from the potatoes. That was an all morning, I think a 4-hour stint, because we had to have enough potatoes to feed the whole crowd aboard. We had one submarine scare, as we thought, trying to read the Aldous lamp coming from one of the Dutch or New Zealand. We had Dutch escort and New Zealand escort up on the trip to Moresby.
Yeah, the New Zealand was the Achilles, I think.
Yeah. One was a destroyer, and I think one was a frigate and one was a destroyer.
And as a signaller, you could read the
Aldous lamp, but it was just that it said potential submarine. Of course, everything was blacked out. There was no smoking allowed on deck. Portholes were all covered over. And one thing, they had a boxing championship, and as I did quite a bit of amateur boxing prior to the war with the Victorian Railways Institute, I decided I'd be in that.
And how did you go? Who did you fight?
And, well, first of all, I fought Kenny Phelan, who was one of the SIGs. He volunteered for it also, and I beat him. And then there evidently weren't too many applicants, because the fellow I met for the championship was about 4 stone heavier than me. He only hit me once. He hit me on the back of the head and knocked me out.
That's a bit unfair.
I think it was a foul punch, because I'm sure that the first round went a long more than the 2 minutes it was supposed to go, because I was puffing and panting. Well, Georgie Watson, whom I knew beforehand, because he was all... I used to work for my father at the races, and Georgie Watson was the son of Coey Watson, who was also a bookmaker, and George was sergeant in transport. And he said, "What?" He said, "You hit him about 50 times, he only hit you once." George was a bit disgusted, but I said, "He hit me in the right place to knock me out," which was at the back of the head. Because if you hit there, the cerebellum is evidently quite close to the bone. And I just went down on my hands and knees. Anyway, that was the end of the boxing championship. That fellow tried himself out in Moresby. had a boxing ring put up. The Americans put one up, and this fella fought in one of the fights, and the Americans were all dashing around. I'll have 200 pounds on the nigger, 200 pounds on the nigger, 200 pounds, you know. And I thought, something's fishy here. But they got into the ring, they shook hands, and I think he lasted 13 seconds. It was bang, 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 and he was out. The American Negro was an Olympic contender. It was a Negro, I think in the 96 Field Engineers, the United States Army. I'll always, small things you remember.
When you finished on the Aquitania and you steamed into Port Moresby and you saw New Guinea for the first time in those looming mountains.
No, we never saw that. It's just marshy. It's flat.
How did you feel when you arrived, Bill?
Well, we felt pretty awkward. The Aquitania was too big to come into the wharf at Moresby, so we climbed down these nets hung from the side of the ship. We climbed down with rifles over our shoulder, full marching equipment and everything else. I think we were still in our woolen garb. And as you probably heard the story about, a lot of the fellas took their golf clubs, tennis rackets and what have you up to Moresby, thinking it was going to be a lovely holiday unit. And we marched out to the 7 mile strip from Moresby, stinking hot afternoon. It's about 35 degrees, and sun beating down, high humidity, and marching out to the 7 mile strip in the afternoon. My God. There were tennis rackets being flung to the side of the road and golf clubs being thrown away to the side of the road. We had one fellow had a sort of a fiddle, one string fiddle made out of, I think it was either a cigar box, one string that he used to play. It went. Fortunately, I was not that way inclined. I didn't think we'd be playing any sport. This was the army.
So what happened when you finally got to the 7 mile?
When we finally got to the 7 mile, they discovered that we had no tents, no cooking gear, no mosquito nets, no anything, no food, nothing at all. It had all been stored in the hold of the Aquitania, which hadn't been unloaded. So by this time, I think most of the fellas had been mosquito bitten, and the mosquitoes are malaria carrying, and consequently within a fortnight we had a huge percentage of troops down with malaria.
Did you get malaria, Bill?
No, I didn't get malaria on the way to the 7 mile. I did get malaria. I know two times, they've claimed 3 times in my medical report, but I think they mistook that for the scrub typhus. I got it once in Moresby, and once when I returned back. That's right, after the Icharaba business.
Once you settled into the 7 mile.
Well, I was only there, I think, 2 or 3 days before we were detailed out with B Company. And
where did you go to with B Company?
I and those 2 other SIGs were the SIGs attached to B Company. We had a line from headquarters, we were at the 7 mile, out to this valley. It's got a name, and for the life of me, I can't think of it. About late in January, early in February, the order came. Oh, after Singapore fell. That's right, we got the news that Singapore had fallen, and that made us think very seriously. And all of the civilians in Moresby were told to prepare themselves for evacuation to Australia. They were allowed one bag. They had to abandon their home, abandon everything in the home. I managed to find a couple of phones, and I put one in Captain Templeton's quarters and one in the CSM's quarters, for which the CSM was very grateful. He said, now I don't have to get out of bed whenever Sam wants me. I could just pick up the phone and answer him.
What was Sam Templeton like?
Very nice fella. Very nice fella. Very kind to his troops. And did I tell you the episode of the first bombing raid when he and I were standing beside the SIGs, we 3 SIGs had to dig our own slit trench and a room, cover it with fallen trees and put corrugated iron strips over the top of that, and then cover all that with about 18 inches of dirt. And in that there was our SIG office, because we had communication to a United States engineer unit who were about a mile away. That was quite a laugh. Every time I got advice of a bombing raid, I'd advise these, that they were Negroes, and I'd advise them, Japanese air raid imminent, 50 planes, approximately 20 minutes. Thank you. The Negro would answer, 96th Field Regiment, United States Army. And I'd say, imminent bombing raid, thank you. Then you couldn't reach them again for another 2 hours. That was it. They all went bush. So I just advise the officer commanding the company, that was Captain Templeton, and he just say thanks and walk up to our quarters. And when I'm standing there when the Japanese came over, and we could see them up against the sky, and we heard the engine note alter going, and all these pieces of what looked like tinsel fall down. And I said, sir, what are they? He said, oh, they're the bombs. Huh? I was eyeing that slit trench pretty closely, I'll tell you that. But they were only bombing the 7 Mile, where we weren't. We were about a mile away down the valley. That was the valley where the Jap Zeros used to fly straight in across. I have loosed a couple of rounds at them from the safety of the slit trench as they flew like 40, 50 yards away.
Was that a regular occurrence for them to fly in? And what was that like, Bill?
As long as they blew our cookhouse to the blazes, that was the B Company cookhouse, which was on a slight hill there, and they loosed either heavy machine gun or cannon fire on it, made a mess of it, but they they strafed the strip, the 7 miles drone, rather than strafe up the valley. But we had stand twos, at least once a week. We had to dig trenches down by the shore, erect barbed wire, entanglements. That's fortunately we weren't called upon, but the rest of the boys spent practically every day at work parties, unloading ships at the wharf.
You weren't involved in the MacDooey incident?
No, I wasn't involved in the MacDooey incident. Matter of fact, I don't think I ever was put aboard the MacDooey, because we were more or less specialists who had a job to do. As SIGs, we were to keep communications up. And we had C Company at Bootless Bay, who were our nearest 39th. And I can well recall countless times trying to contact C Company, no answer. So we had to go out between the three of us, like we take it in turns, to go out down the track to Bootless Bay, see that there hadn't been, enemy cutting the SIG cable or things like that happening. And we just had to check it over. And 9 times out of 10, they'd find the SIG operator in C Company sound asleep beside the phone. That's happened to me before today too. It used to be 4 hours on and 8 hours off, 4 hours on and 8 hours off, 4 hours on and 8 hours off, all through the week. And sometimes your 8 hours would come during the afternoon of the day. You know, before the rains came, it'd be stinking hot sun, you'd sweat. We had made ourselves pretty comfortable. We'd got branches from trees, hacked them off, strung a couple of tent bags between them, made ourselves a nice, comfortable little sleeping couch there for our siesta of the night, and we had another tent bag strung under the big tree, which hid us from everything, which was more or less right above us. And from it we hung the tent bag full of water, into which we put our 2 bottles of beer a week in for a party once a month, so that we'd have 8 and sometimes as much as a dozen bottles of beer in there.
What was the food like there, Bill? You had a cookhouse before it was attacked by the Japanese, but was the food okay?
The food, well, we did get hot food. We did get hot food because one of us either went to the cookhouse and got rations for 3, or they would bring down, one of the cooks or orderlies would bring down the food for the day. And we used to have potatoes and that in bully beef and dehydrated veg and meat and veg.
Was there any training during this time, any jungle type training that the troops carried out?
Never ever. They were too busy unloading ships. They were busy unloading ships. The 49th were busy fixing roads after the bombing. The 39th and the 53rd were busy unloading ships. And that was all the training we had. No one in their wildest dreams in command thought that anyone would try to invade Australia. No.
During the bombing raids, do you remember eventually the Kitty Hawks arriving from Australia?
The that was a standing joke. You know, we received the news, and I passed it on through the company, that we were to get Kitty Hawks, the latest American fighter. Because we were used to seeing these Japanese fly over a couple of times a week, and they told us that they'd be here on the Tuesday. We were told on the Saturday they'd be arriving on the Tuesday. Tuesday came and went, no Kitty Hawks. Wednesday the same. So then they became known as the Tomorrow Hawks. And after 3 weeks went by, they became the Never Hawks. And then out of the blue, without being told a word about it, these 3 planes flew over with markings no one knew. They had the American roundels on their wings. We could see them quite plainly. Said, I don't know who they are, but so they got to be Japanese. Actually, I had a thought at the time that they were Russian. But it was some, half hour, 40 minutes after they went past us, the MGs, the LMGs up on the strip, the 7-mile strip, opened up on them until the order came, stop firing their arrows, stop firing. So then it was established that they were the Kitty Hawks. No one had told us they were arriving.
So once they arrived, it must have been good. That would have been a good boost to morale after going through many bombing raids.
That was a great... we still got the bombing raids afterwards. One of them never ever took off again. We go up to the 75 Squadron luncheon in Brisbane. There's 4 or 5 of us of the 39th, and we apologised to them for what happened. And the story came back. One of them had said, one of the pilots had said, if he had have discovered where in the hell we were, he'd have given us some bloody machine gun fire in place. But that was just afterwards. They've accepted our apology. And they said, well, it really wasn't your fault. You weren't told. That's right.
Well, Bill,
it was great because that afternoon we had the Japanese observation plane. Used to come over about 2 o'clock of an afternoon. We called him Sewing Machine Betty. I think that was a Mitsubishi Betty bomber, the one that was known as a Betty. And he serenely came over to take the photos of everything that had occurred from the previous day, you know, the bombing raid the previous day and strafing, etc. And out of the crowds behind him came the 2 Kitty Hawks. And he went away streaming smoke.
The troops would have been happy about that?
Oh, the troops were very happy. But 2 aren't going to do much good. I think both of those pilots were killed in raids on the other side. The first thing we knew of an invasion was American reconnaissance reported 70 Japanese had landed at Buna. Blamey flew over from Townsville. MacArthur came over the next day, and Blamey sent out, I'm taking a lot of this from what's been written, Blamey sent out the state of the troops to get the effect of the state of the troops. and Major General in charge of Murray Barracks. Was it Porter? No.
Potts.
No, Potts was Brigadier, 21st Brigade. No, this was the bloke who was commanding officer, General Officer commanding Maroubra Force, as it was called, which comprised 39th, 49th and 53rd. It's in Murray Barracks. I don't think his name was Murray. Bennett? Oh, I can't think. Anyway, he advised that the troops had been used on all sorts of, and Blamey was supposed to have said, well, he said, pick out the most fit. And the 39th were evidently considered the most fit because we were volunteers. The 53rd had been shanghaied and the 49th had been there for 16, 18 months. So then they had to find out who was the fittest of the 39th. And task was given to B Company to go over the track. We didn't know what the track was, where it was, or anything about it. But I went to Captain Templeton and I said, B Company to move over the track, sir. Then I had to explain what track, the Kokoda Track, to him, although he probably had the orders himself. And I said, you'll need signals, sir, for communication. No, he said, I want riflemen. I don't want signallers. So we three then went back to 7 Mile when B Company moved out, and the next day after arriving there, A Company took off and we were put with A Company.
So what was the walk like across the track, Bill?
Bloody awful. It was mud. It started to rain, and it didn't rain, it pelted. And you'd be wet through. You'd managed to get to a village at about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, after taking off at 5 or 6 in the morning. You'd get to a village at about 6 o'clock at night. We went over there. We were loaded up with 4 hand grenades, 2 bandoliers of .303 ammunition. That's 100 rounds, I think, in each bandolier, which is mighty heavy. Full kit, haversack, knapsack, bayonet. I think we had about 50 or 60 kilograms of weight to carry it. I think that's what stopped a lot of the blokes.
So you with A Company, was it strange? Because you probably didn't know a lot of the A Company.
No, the
blokes.
three of us kept together.
You would have stuck together.
Yes. We three were actually together until I lost them at Dennehy.
Who were the other two again?
Bobby Hilton Hughes. I found out later his name was Hilton. To me, he was always Bobby. Curly-headed, dark to ginger hair. He was only a kid, about 17. And Kevin Sullivan.
Was Kevin the same age as you, or a little bit younger?
No, he was younger than me. He was 20, I think it was.
And the three of you stuck together?
We stuck together right through. And when we reached Dennehy, we were detailed by Duvet to occupy this lean-to about, the size of that pantry there.
This is Lieutenant Duvet.
Lieutenant Duvet.
He was in A Company?
He was headquarter company, commanding SIGs. He was the SIG lieutenant after Bertie Oliver had transferred. Said he had, I can always remember him, he had a little moustache and this bent stem pipe which came down his chin and out. A pipe, and he held this pipe in his mouth and it had to be moving up and down like this all the time. Yes. I don't know what happened to him, because of course I wasn't there when the battalion was broken up. I got a job in the orderly room at LHQ, at Paymaster-in-Chief's office, under Brigadier Holder. I must have been a bright kid those days.
So back to Denicky.
Denicky. So when the lieutenant came and told us he wanted us, the three of us, back at the mission hut, and I said, but sir, that's going to take all communications away. I know, we'll fix that up. So I talked to the other two and I said, what do you think? So the thing was, go to Cameron and ask. So
This is Major Cameron, who was
Yes.
In charge of the battalion at that stage.
Who was put in charge after Colonel Owen was killed at Kokoda. And he was at Denicky, and he sent when the rest of the battalion had arrived, he sent one company through Misamar, one company on the Kokoda Track straight into Kokoda. That was A Company. I'm struggling along with a spool of cable, trying to lay the line along. There was I have been told there was a line from Kokoda, but I never ever found it. There was supposed to be SIGs at Kokoda. Tom Keating swears that he was at Kokoda, and yet Sam Templeton told me he didn't want SIGs, he wanted riflemen. So, we got to the junction of the Misamar track, and D Company, we met the forward elements of D Company coming back. And I said, what's going on? And they said, get out of here, the Japs are right behind us. They had run into an ambush along the track where Dean and his 2IC was killed. Captain Dean. Yeah. So we just dumped the wire and went back with them to Denicky. A Company reached Kokoda and found that there were only about 6 Japs there. And when they saw A Company approaching, the Japs, Bill Gestas told us that the Japs nicked off. And there were a couple of sporadic attacks on the Kokoda, again by, small groups of Japanese. But the Yanks wouldn't land there because they wouldn't land there the first time, carrying the troops over, C Company over, and they wouldn't land there to bring the supplies to them, ammunition, etc., for fear that there might have been Zeros around. They stayed there until the Japs made a major attack.
So the battalion basically then got back to Ishirava?
The battalion were Cameron gave the order to withdraw from Denicky, but he quite evidently never told everyone. He never told every company commander, because there were quite a few troops who was still in Deneki when the Japs came up from Kokoda. And they withdrew to Isharava, which Honor had found, and Honor made out the whole groups, and I can always, someone came back and told me this is as far as we go. Colonel Honor's words.
Did you have an opportunity to meet Colonel Honor during the Isharava battle?
I must have, because I had to go to battalion headquarters. Whether I saw him or whoever was there as 2IC there, I don't recall, but I just had to report A Company was in position.
You had a close call at Isharava.
One threw me hat, and I often thought about what if Garland had said, Corporal, you go to C Company, Sig, you go to battalion headquarters. Instead of that, he went the other way around.
So tell us a bit about that, Bill.
Well, Lionel Watts was the other Sig. We were the two runners there with A Company. There must have been other SIGs around, but I never ever came across any of them. I went to battalion headquarters and reported A Company, and when I was on my way back to A Company, I found this copper of hot, it was either bully beef and veg or M&V. I can't remember much, but I remember spooning it up, and I'm against a tree, and boom, and my hat left my head. I looked around and dropped straight to the ground. Picked up my hat, and there's a bullet hole straight through it. And I thought, Jesus. I thought the sound was that they were using explosive bullets. Anyway, after I was told that Watsy had been shot through the head by a sniper on his way to C Company, that night we were, 6 of us were told to go down and pick up the body along the track, bring it back for burial. So we went down. There were 6 of us. We were all given 4 hand grenades and extra clips of ammunition, and a rifle and this made-up stretcher. We found the body and put his body in the thing, lifted it up, well, one on each corner, and made our way back in the dark. Oh, God. I think it was that night. I got my ground sheet out on the ground, and a lieutenant, I can't recall who he was, but he came along and he said, "Can I share this, Corp?" I said, "Yes, sir." And it was that night that I woke with this weight on my chest, and I woke up and I got this great big bush rat perched right on my stomach, right there looking at me. God, I can see his red eyes and teeth to this day. And that, so I believe, was the start of the scrub typhus. The fleas from the rat infested me, and I ended up with two red bands around my tummy, like red poppies around my tummy. And a couple of days after that, I started to feel crook. I couldn't breathe. And I went to the RAP, and he put a thermometer in my mouth and said, "Oh, you've got malaria." Gave me a couple of Aspros. He said, "Come back tomorrow." So I felt no better next day. And back I went, and evidently my temperature had gone up quite alarmingly. And he said, I think you'd better get back. So he reported to Captain Symington that I had to be evacuated. So I'm going back, and it was there I met Phil Goss, who was another SIG, and he had been stooping down to relieve his bowels when he was shot right through the cheek of his backside. He's hobbling along the track, and Gossie and I stayed together practically all the way back. One thing, we get down, I don't think we went back along the old Kokoda Track. I think that we must have taken a side track because we went through the 2nd 16th lines. And the 2nd 16th were up on our right. God, I can remember going past two of them on an embankment where the track ran along the front of it. And these young kids, they didn't want to go along the track because the two 2nd 16th blokes had a Vickers machine gun up on the top of it. And I said, come on. And they said, no, I'm not going along there. So I fixed my bayonet. I said, I think you'd better, or I'm going to put this right up your backside. I can remember that. And it was on that truck, Gossie and I, beside a big old fallen tree, found this pack that a native carrier had dropped. And it consisted of army biscuits and raspberry jam. So we had the best feed that we'd had for 3 or 4 weeks. On army biscuits and raspberry jam at night, we ate until we could eat no more. And then took off again along the track.
And made your way back to Port Moresby?
I made my way back as far as Efogi, where Captain Symington joined us. Efogi, and I wandered off from Efogi. I must have been pretty bloody delirious. I can remember wandering off, and I'm halfway along the track when Symington caught me and said, wanted to know what I was doing. And I said, I'm going back, sir. No, you stay here. I said, yes, sir. But I've got to go back. Anyway, by the time we got to Koitaki, the bloke took my temperature and I was 106.
And that was the end of your war?
That was the end of my war.
Now, Bill, I'll have to end this now. On behalf of the 39th Battalion Association Historical Subcommittee, we would like to thank you for your time and this very interesting interview. Thank you.